Happy politics, and welcome to what I know is your favorite BC politics podcast. I know that because it's mine, and if I'm thinking it, you probably are too. At least that's the science I'm using this week. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of this fine publication, The Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications, the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Maclean, I mean, you and I will always record from distance, but very soon, socially distant will be relegated to the scrap heap of history we won't even remember.
I hope so. You know, every time I turn on Twitter, I see people saying, well, you know, I think I'm going to keep masking till Christmas. I'm not ready for crowds until... Yeah, that's kind of my reaction too. I understand where some of this is coming from. It's just, it's fear, it's caution, it's inertia from 16 months of social distancing, and that's totally fine. But I think that a lot of this stuff is just going to grind to a halt in the summer. I think most people have kind of had their fill. But, I mean, if you're not one of those people and you're not ready and you're afraid, I don't blame you. Take your time. Take your time. You know, like we'll be here when you're ready, and I think that's okay. I will not shame anyone who still needs to wear a mask in the thrifties in August. That's fine.
Yeah, you know what, we last night in the park across the street from us, we had about 40 of us out there for a kids baseball wrap-up. And Maclean, it was so refreshingly normal. Like, it was great.
Yeah.
And, talking among the parents, almost all of them, everyone had the first shot. Most had second or shots or were already scheduled. And they were just so excited to be doing something normal, even if it was just playing ball in the park and shooting a silly string at the kids, doing whatever. It's amazing. 15 months after this started, that the feeling it's almost euphoric to get that chance again.
Oh yeah, I mean, last weekend, my wife, son, and I were up in I was going to say up island, just up in Sydney, seeing my parents outside, and we stayed a little too long because it's my parents. And on the way back, we know it's getting really late for dinner, and we got to feed the kid, and we don't have the stuff at home to cook, and we're like, oh God, I don't feel like cooking. And he bravely floated this idea: what if we went to a patio? Would that be okay? Would that be okay? And we were like, ooh. Ooh, risky. And we did. It was just a Boston pizza because it's his favorite. But my God, never have I enjoyed sitting in a converted parking lot more.
The funny thing with Maclean is you guys live on the island. Like at the height of the epidemic, you had maybe 15 new cases a day. You had zero for a few days last week. Like, come on. Like, I live in Fraser Health.
The K family's pretty risk averse. The K family is pretty risk averse, almost across the board. We are conservative, small C conservative Scots.
I live in Fraser Health. I survived the real pandemic. You Islanders, man, come on.
Hey, speaking of taking the plunge, normally when we talk, we usually talk about the BC Liberal leadership race at the end of the show. But, I mean, the big news this week is there's finally a new, much rumored entrant that we have discussed before. Val Litwin, former CEO of the BC Chamber of Commerce, has officially declared he's in with an op-ed and some news releases and a splashy video, which I actually thought was very well done. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. He's in. The rumors are true. I think we first talked about them like 2 months ago. What did you think of the launch?
Might be more than that. So far, so good. Val's website, I think, is probably the best looking of the websites I've seen so far, vallitwin.ca. Okay. Picked a color. It's kind of a pinky purple color as a theme, which it sort of works as a kind of a differentiator. He's managed by Stephen Carter. It's my understanding is the campaign manager out of Alberta, but who managed Mike DeYoung's campaign last time, and a well-known podcaster, Love the Strategist podcast with him and Corey Hogan, torturing poor Zane Velji day week after week after week.
It's no BC Poly HOTSTOVE, but I mean, what is?
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. I mean, exactly. But came out of the box very clear on two messages. Number one, I'm an outsider who can bring real change to the BC Liberal Party and help us reconnect with young people. Maybe that is the only message, actually. And then number two, there was a little bit on the small business side, and we got to do this because we got to get the economy going again. And that really is, it makes sense. If you and I think we've talked about this several times. Yeah. That is Val's strengths. That's his background. It makes sense that that would be his message. So yeah, it was good. The thing I liked about their website the most is if you scroll down a bit, you'll see several videos clearly shot on mobile phones of just real human beings saying why they support Val. I have a theory in BC politics that the hardcore political watchers versus sort of kind of everyday British Columbians, you can often tell the difference by how they refer to the parties. The hardcore folks call it the BC Liberal Party. The kind of looser folks, the more normal humans, will often call it just the Liberal Party. Those videos, I think there was 7 or 8 of them. 3 or 4 I saw, maybe more, talked about the Liberal Party. So clearly not dyed-in-the-wool partisans, but the kind of new people that Val will need to bring into the party if he's hoping to be successful. So yeah, good launch, look good. I'll be curious to see where he goes this summer. He talks about on the website about virtually crisscrossing the province this summer. I'd say take virtually out of there, Val. Get out there. Val's a very sociable, personable guy. Yeah. He's good with people in person. My encouragement would be to don't virtually, get out there and do it live and in person.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Val will be the latest in a long and very interesting series of political outsiders, and I'm using the air quotes for that have run for various party leaderships in different places across Canada. I mean, we're talking everyone from Dan Larson to Kevin O'Leary to Michael Ignatieff, and obviously there's a lot of varying degrees of success there. And so I think when a few episodes ago, maybe a couple months ago, when we first discussed Val Litwin potentially running, I think it was you that said very high ceiling, but also possibly a very low floor, because he is fairly unintroduced to the political faithful in this province. And so it'll be fascinating to see how he does. But I think we agree, as far as launches go, he did pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting way to run a race, right? Like, you're the outsider, you don't have the infrastructure within the party, you don't have the natural kinship with several thousand members. Like Michael Lee, he signed up several thousand of those members in the last leadership race. Ellis Ross has been an MLA for years. He has a following within the party. Kevin Falcon, big following within the BC Liberal Party, and many of those members, if not all of them, well aware of who Kevin Falcon is. Gavin do a little different, worked behind the scenes a lot more, but you work behind the scenes, you run into people, you get to know people, you talk to people.
And he has run before too, which is it's a useful experience.
Totally. Renee Merrifield, he's the other candidate who we expect to jump into the race any day now. Health critic, first term MLA, probably the shallowest roots within the party at this point, although growing day by day. But Val comes in, he's a complete outsider. And here's what I would say about Val. He has experience changing brands that have been around for a long time. The BC Chamber of Commerce has been around since the time began, since the first business was conducted in British Columbia, practically. And they had a very popular CEO president, John Winter, who was a mainstay of the advocacy community for decades. And John retired, and after a little speed bump, Val took over as president of the Chamber of Commerce and really rebranded it into something a little more interactive, something a little more just modern edged. He launched a public opinion platform so he could be constantly surveying members within the BC Chamber of Commerce, so that he always felt like he was confident he could speak out and say, yeah, well, 2/3 of our members say X, or 60% of our members don't support Y. And he had that basis there. So he had a little tinge of populism within his membership, constantly feeding back, constant kind of feedback as to what was going on. Those are not insignificant steps to rebrand an organization after that long. Now, ICBA, we had a president for 30 years. Now we have Chris Gardner. There's a lot of rebranding that's been going on with us. We've shifted a lot over the past 4 years, and we'll shift a lot more over the next 4. That's great. BC Liberal Party, same kind of boat, right? For Val Litwin, I can just see him kind of looking at the challenge going, okay, Gordon Campbell, Christy Clark, it's just like when I came in after John Winter and having to take this in a different direction and tailoring our message to a new generation of British Columbian. I think that's an interesting advantage, and if you can catch fire at the right moment, you can make a plausible case that he could win.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I talked about political outsider candidates before, and you mentioned Michael Lee, who was a sort of newcomer to campaigning in politics, but had been around politics for a very long time and had just won an election as an MLA. And of course, the other candidate in the last race was Diane Watts, who had won elections, of course, to be the mayor of Surrey. What Val is doing, everything you just said is absolutely true. But what Val is doing is in many ways more difficult than what Diane Watts and Michael Lee were attempting, in that, to my knowledge, he's never contested an election.
Nope.
But I agree with you that many of those skills are very much transferable.
Yeah, absolutely. Val, there's a benefit. Like, the benefit of being a political outsider is this: you can speak without any baggage of the scandals, right? Like, he doesn't have to worry about money laundering. He doesn't have to couch things in certain terms, right? Like, he's free from all of that. So there's a freedom there that you can speak out on. The flip side is you don't have those deep roots. And ultimately, it's generally the deep roots that decide these elections. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not familiar enough with the Chamber of Commerce's kind of web into local communities. I don't know how much interaction Val had with actual small business owners day to day or week to week. That would be a huge advantage if he's had a lot, because that's a voter base that doesn't often get tapped, but is obviously very invested in where the economy of British Columbia is going. But those will be questions for the coming days and weeks. And at the very least, another youngish. He's my age, so can I say that, Maclean? He's our age.
44.
Youngish.
He's young. He's totally young.
Young adjacent candidate. Obviously, new. Keen to have big ideas and include them in the overall context of the redefinition of the party. I think that's a good thing. I wonder a little bit, are he and Gavin mowing each other's lawn a little bit? Both.
Yeah,
but
it's possible.
61% of the electorate's under the age of 40 now. If you're going to mow each other's lawn, that's the one to mow. Like, that's a lot of acreage there to pick up.
It's a rich lawn. It's a rich lawn.
Exactly.
There's lots of grass to cut there. And just so it's said, because I do think it's important and relevant in these things. I mean, Val Litwin is a telegenic. Yeah. He's charismatic, and dare I say it, he's a good-looking guy. There, I said it. He's, as we say, he's got a very high ceiling. Yeah. But as a political neophyte, obviously the floor is. Well, it's probably the lowest of all the actual declared candidates so far. But I mean, we're talking about potential ranges, not like, he's going to finish here there. I don't have a good handle on the rules yet. We have no idea, who's selling memberships or will be selling memberships behind the scenes in what numbers. And so, I mean, I got asked today, well, who's going to win the leadership race? I don't know.
Right now you're crazy to say anyone other than Kevin Falcon, I think. Like, Kevin Falcon is the hands down favorite at this point. But, it's 7 months away, 8 months away before they vote. Before we vote, like, that's a long time to go. No one's even met with riding associations yet. Like, anything can happen from here on in. And you're right. Val is telegenic, charismatic. He's got lots of experience doing interviews. He can speak in sound bites without sounding shallow or short. He'd be a very interesting contrast to a John Horgan in the next election. Like, premier dad suddenly becomes premier grandpa when up against someone young like Val. It would be interesting. Here's why I say it. I don't think he's. Remember Ed Main, the former mayor of Parksville, who ran the last BC Liberal leadership race and was DOA. Crickets voted for him essentially. Ed Main and Mrs. Ed Main, I think, and that was about it. But he's not Ed Main. Like, he comes in with some. He's known a little bit around the province. I think the media will take him seriously. Like, my sense is the Vaughn Palmers, Richard Zussmans, the Rob Shaws of the world will take him seriously, and that's a good sign. So good campaign launch. All of these candidates have launched in different ways, and they've all been good. Like, let me rephrase. They've all been authentic to who they are. So Ellis's launch was not textbook, but it was very authentic to Ellis, who Ellis was. Right, Ellis. Will tell you the truth no matter what, even if it costs him. And the local reporter calls him up and says, hey, I hear you're running for the leadership. And you can just see Ellis, I am. I guess I'm in. And, scuttling the launch there. But that is perfectly Ellis, perfectly authentic.
Yeah, it's true.
Kevin's, very slickly produced, probably the best produced of them all. It's very Kevin. He's a very, professional. It's a lot about politics, very careful in that. Michael Lee at the kitchen table, preferring the interview kind of format, very authentic to who he is. Who am I forgetting? Oh, Gavin's was incredibly well organized. Maybe, still maybe the best organized, start and has managed to carry through with Summer in Media. So yeah, they've all launched well, and that's good for the party. We still need Renee to jump in the race, and I'm not sure if she's planning to do that pre-summer or if she's, just going to kind of.
Summer was yesterday.
Yeah, right. Or you're right. Or if she's planning to just kind of run a pseudo campaign, a shadow campaign during the summer, and then launch fully in September. I mean, everyone knows she's in the race, so there's no element of surprise. So I guess do whatever she thinks is to her best advantage.
I mean, I guess at this point it's either this week or next, realistically, right? I mean, do you want to be going mid-August or mid-July? I don't know. We'll see. But you're right. That is, Val was a much rumored, in fact, much discussed on this show, even candidate, and he's official now. The one thing we haven't talked about yet was the fact that, there was no question period this morning. The spring session is over, and there's a million angles we can take on this, but I wanted to bring up one that our very own Rob Shaw wrote about, and I think it's an interesting and worthwhile one. He wrote a few months ago, actually, an interesting interview with John Horgan where he was talking about the youth overdose bill that was stalled out last summer for a number of reasons, and that he said that at the time, well, this is something he just couldn't stomach. We needed to have an election so that things like this could get accomplished. And that just a couple months ago, he said that this was very personal for him. When he was a young drug user, his words, that he didn't care much for what was going on in Victoria. He just knew he needed help. And so now that session's over and he's been had a majority government for 8 months, we haven't really moved forward on this bill that would make treatment compulsory for teens and youth who have suffered an overdose. Kind of surprising. And now that we've had a very lengthy spring session behind us, it kind of makes some of the reasons for forcing a snap pandemic election look a little more dodgy.
I gotta be a little careful what I say here because I don't want to.
That was a long pause.
I don't want to let
that one linger there.
Call the Premier of the province of British Columbia Pinocchio, but look, John Horgan's reasons for going to the election were disingenuous. His stated reasons for going to the election were disingenuous. The media knew it then. The public knew it then. The opposition certainly knew it then. He ripped up an agreement. You recall the howls of people like John Horgan or Gordon Campbell ripping up agreements with teachers and other public workers. He ripped up a signed agreement with the BC Greens, claimed it was over this issue. It wasn't, clearly. If it was, this issue would become law. I mean, think of all the different acts that passed, all the different bills that passed into law in this last. If it was important, it would have happened. It was an excuse to go to the polls, and he went to the polls because he had a big lead. Yeah. And Andrew Wilkinson was in a bit of disarray, and same reason we're going to go to the polls later this summer with Justin Trudeau.
Exactly.
25-point leads. Like, okay, let's go. But just be honest about it. Like, the election's passed. I would note, Norm Spector would note, it took until last week for the COVID numbers to drop to pre-election election levels. That's a long time to recover from the social permission, the social license that was given by having an election in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know if there is going to be a Matter of Confidence Part 2 book, but if there was someone writing a book about the last election, I don't know how you could ever take John Horgan at his word as far as the reasons for the election. There was one reason for the election. There was one job that he was worried about in the election. That was his own. He saw the window and he went for it. And to say otherwise is crazy. This particular bill, though, I'm old enough to remember when the NDP freaked out at then Solicitor General Rich Coleman suggesting precisely the exact same sort of thing, like kids need help, we got to get them into hospitals whether they want to go or not.
Yeah. And
they had a collective panic attack over the loss of civil liberties and how dare you and blah, 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 and all draconian, the state coming in and grabbing children and putting them in hospitals because they're addicted to drugs or whatever. Like, I'm old enough to remember this. So it's amusing for me now to watch John Horgan, in his heart of hearts, want to put this into place. Now, he's not making any progress on it because various watchdogs are saying, hold up.
Yeah. No, there are people who are very vocal in their opposition to the idea, and fair enough. But
yeah,
You're right. It's an urgent problem. And here's the thing, is that this bill was before the legislature and amended to death last summer. And when it came up, you'll see, if you haven't read Rob's piece, I encourage you to. I mean, when asked about the status of this, it was, well, we have a plan to begin consultations. It wasn't even like, well, there's some things that we've been working on that are, bubbling behind the scenes. And I would personally love it to have it ready now, but it's just not for these various legal reasons, whatever, blah, 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 blah. No, a plan to begin consultations is government speak for. It's just not at the front of the desk. Yeah. And I mean, it is what it is. It's just, okay, well, Yeah. And we don't need to relitigate the last election. But I mean, we have for a long time just kind of winced at the idea of him saying he woke up on the Saturday before and decided to call an election when he had already filmed election ads. I'm sorry. It's just you filmed them. You did. Was that just in case? If so, really? Yeah.
Does he have one filmed right now, just in case? Because what if he wakes up tomorrow and Mrs. Horgan's like, "Time to go. Come on." No, like this. You're exactly right. It is problematic. Listen, compulsory trade's an issue near and dear to terrifying ICBA members. They're doing consultation now, but they've already announced the policy and they've announced the law, what the law will be, and now they're working on regulations and now they're doing consultations. So don't give me this idea that you have to like that this is so much different than that. Like you could have announced what you're going to do and then had consultation after when it came to the regulatory scheme to go with it. But your government, you justify it however you can, and I just don't think it's anywhere near as big a priority as John Horgan has pretended it is. Just like I don't think anything to do with mental health has been as big a priority for John Horgan as he claimed it was, because we have the Ministry of Air, we have all sorts of lack of services going on, and at a time where mental health is a bigger crisis today than ever before, the government seems to be doing as little as possible to actually make any kind of substantive difference.
And we've just come back after a brief technical interlude, and I apologize, but right before that happened, Jordan had mentioned regulatory schemes, and that inspired me to propose that you and I, Jordan, commit an offense. And that offense, of course, is gimmick infringement, the worst offense in the podcast world, but we're going to do it anyway. The gimmick in question is talking about Vancouver City Hall and the cost of living there. And I know, George Affleck and Jody Vance, that is your gig. And I apologize, but I'm not here next week, so I'm allowed to duck and hide. As you have no doubt seen, Jordan, the city of Vancouver is proposing not only a fee to enter the city with your car, but also to park said car overnight if you are visiting the city. Now, I should preface this. I live in Victoria. You live in Langley. This, if it happens, will only affect me a couple of times a year. But I put it to you that even if we are indeed in a climate emergency, it's an open question whether this is the time to impose new costs in what is already Canada's most expensive jurisdiction, and where affordability is top of mind for most voters in the city, if polls are to be believed.
Yes. Maclean. So I'm listening to Unspun, and if you want to know the problem for the BC Liberals, here's what it comes down to. George Affleck, who, as you know, I adore, BC Liberal candidate in Fairview last time.
One of the F's. I can never remember which one's which.
Yeah, it would have been Fraserview. He's too good to run there. It would have been Fairview. He was not as condemning of this terrible idea as I thought he was going to be on Unspun. Now, this is a problem for the BC Liberals because the BC Liberals are the kind of party who hate this sort of overreach, right? Like, fees to drive into the city, fees to park overnight, trying to encourage people to do electric cars by essentially taking the stick and beating them to death with unaffordability. But it shows you kind of the problem the BC Liberals have, because if a BC Liberal type like George Affleck is sort of hedging a little bit like this is not the world's worst idea, that is problematic. It shows you how far the party has to go in order to marry kind of the urban with the more rural considerations of the party. I think the idea is stupid. Like, let's just be clear. I mean, making life more expensive in Vancouver makes no sense. Suggesting that everyone have electric cars when they don't have parking to put them, let alone so poor Jody has to run a cord to the street, in order to plug her car in. Well, we all know what's going to happen to that cord as soon as she walks away. like it's mind-boggling to me that Vancouver politicians always seem to think the best way to make their city more livable is to basically drive everyone out of it, except for the latte sipping, knowledge class type people, who, I guess never go anywhere and just use Evo if they actually have to, gasp, leave the peninsula and go into the rest of Vancouver. I don't like it. I think it's crazy. I can't see like the Canucks and BC Lions or, the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. You think of all the amenities that are downtown, and you're going to make it more expensive for people to go there at a time where we're desperate to try to reignite live events. That's crazy to me. To me, there's such an opportunity here for a right-of-center politician to come in and basically kind of hold a mirror up to City Hall and say, look, kids, I'm using kids loosely because I'm old and millennials are young. Kids, you want to know why you can't afford anything in this city? You want to know why you can't afford anything? Because we take 2 years to permit anything. We drive up costs by 40, 50% in permits and fees and regulations and other things. City Hall is to blame for a lot of your problems. Something, by the way, which, noted BC Liberal activist, just kidding, Joy McPhail pointed out in her recent report to the NDP government. So, there's a lot to be done there. I think there's a lot to be mined for a center-right candidate in this very crowded mayoralty election. But again, it does kind of show you that, even center-right people in Vancouver, a little bit different than us center-righties in Langley.
Yeah, and there's, how do I put this nicely without throwing anyone in particular under the bus? But there is an undercurrent, especially online, that has a particular animus towards cars. And that's fine. I mean, yes, it's better if we can all take public transit and walk to work. But for the many of us who just simply can't, screaming at us that, yes, plumbers should be taking their bikes to work, just it isn't realistic. And I know of people who, were lucky enough to get in on a single family home very close to where I am in downtown Victoria now, and don't even have kids who, are vehemently anti-car. And that's great. That's great for you. I know you work at home and you don't need a car. But for those of us who do, adhering to a strict ideological position on this it's not going to work. It's just simply not going to work. I know you live in Langley, like many people, and you commute into, well, not exactly Vancouver, but Burnaby and soon to be Surrey, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong there. And, there's only so many ways you can do that without driving. I would suggest to you that is not unusual. For me here in Victoria, people coming in from Langford, yeah, most of them are probably taking their car because it's still the best option. And so yelling at people for making the best choice on their day-to-day basis does not make it better, does not make for better policy. We need more options. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. But, incentivizing people who own homes to build driveways instead of garden suites and live-in suites, it's not going to help housing affordability whatsoever.
No, you're exactly right. And then what about people who need their vehicles to work? I work for a construction association, and trucks are kind of standard issue, right? And what are they supposed to do? Well, they're going to get punished further for, daring to live within Vancouver city limits. First of all, God bless you if you can still afford to live within city limits anyways, but, you're going to end up paying even more. So it's just such a closed hand approach. It reminds me a lot of when they just unilaterally came out and announced, oh, by the way, after such and such a date, no more natural gas in apartment buildings. What? This is one of the cleanest burning fuels in the world, and we're saying no more natural gas? Oh, and by the way, the same people who wanted to shift us all to electricity were fighting the Site C dam. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's so much hypocrisy there. Yeah. I can't stand it. Like I said, I think if I were John Cooper and I was running for mayor of Vancouver, I would print up fake violation tickets. I'd go to a different neighborhood every night, and I would put these little tickets on every single person's windshield and say, you re-elect Kennedy Stewart, this is what you're getting next year. Vote for me. I will not be ticketing your car and punishing you for daring to own a car within the city limits.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong, and that actually is a really good idea. It's a very Jordan Bateman thing to do.
The media would eat it up.
Yes, they would actually. You're right. It'd be the kind of thing that'd be pinned to the wall of the press gallery over in the legislature. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're about to tweet angrily that Maclean is anti-public transit or bike lanes, no. I'm just saying we need more solutions, not just one or the other. It's not a false binary. So, settle down, Twitter. Come for me later when we talk about something else.
You can tweet us at Unspun Podcast on Twitter.
Yes. Unspun Podcast. Do we want to veer into the realm of federal politics for a moment and talk about the increasingly very ugly federal green implosion?
I don't know enough about green politics. Everything I know about green politics I learned from Jillian Oliver's spin doctoring on Capitol Direct last week, so I don't know.
Oh, poor Jillian, if you're listening, and I know you are, Jordan does not speak for both of us. Jillian is brilliant.
No,
you know what?
Honestly, I don't know anything about green internal politics, and literally I learned it all from Jillian, so I don't know.
Fair enough. We'll just say that we'll continue to watch this then, and let's hope that the Israel-Palestine conflict does not become the defining issue for any other federal Canadian parties, because it doesn't need to be.
It is a weird thing.
Something that you do have personal experience with. You and I shared not a birthday this past weekend, but something that was probably even more significant. We both got our double doses. How did it go for you?
Well, I did AstraZeneca for round 1, believing that the best vaccine is the first vaccine. I did Moderna for round 2. And Maclean, I was so tired the next day. I honestly, it knocked me for a real loop. And even Monday, day 2.5 after, I did not have any stamina whatsoever. But feel good today, and give me another week, and the mRNA will have kicked in, and I'll be completely invincible to everything. So, it was good. But man, it kicked my butt on the weekend for sure.
You got the good stuff. I did a double dose of AstraZeneca, also on the basis of the first one offered. I'm just going to take whatever they give me. The first dose, however many weeks ago that was, that knocked me out. I mean, like stone cold unconscious. And it hurts. Oh my God. It felt like getting a slap shot off the arm, which I have felt before and does not tickle. This was much more gentle. My arm was sore, but not in agonizing pain. And I had a mild headache. But the biggest thing is just a complete lack of energy. And I will be completely straightforward with you. Immediately after we're done taping, I am definitely lying down for 5 minutes because I am exhausted. This is the most strenuous thing I'm going to do all day, except for possibly make dinner for a 6-year-old. It's I mean, none of this should sound like complaining. It's not. I'm very, very, very happy to have my second dose, and I can tell you my wife is jealous in all the right ways. But it's real. The hangover is real. It doesn't affect everyone the same way, but I'm tired.
It's nice to know that us talking for 45 minutes is the most exhausting thing you'll do all week. So there you go.
I didn't say all week. I said all day.
Gabby Wickstrom's listening going, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, the people on YouTube would be like, man, Maclean, makeup for men, it's not a problem. You should just use it.
Yeah, for sure.
The bags under the eyes, which are real. Well, and this is also a good time to note that there will be no show next week. Woo. Because such is my hangover that I'm taking all of next week off.
No, a well-deserved week off. I'm terrified to live a week without the Finn, but I will muddle by using doing the old-fashioned thing of going to 77 different news sources to figure out what's happening in the world. But have a good week off. You certainly deserve it. And
thank you.
I'll see you on the 6th.
Yeah, I'll be back refreshed, I hope, and I'm eager, and God willing, with a tan that is not just a recovered sunburn. But I mean, looking at the weather forecast for next week, oh my God.
I know. Also looking at how pasty you are.
Yes, it's true. I've referenced being a small C conservative Scot earlier. That is part and parcel of being pasty. So yes. Until next week, until 2 weeks from now, until July, faithful listeners and watchers. He's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K. Happy politics.